Let's start off with this. Murdered master's student Olorato Mongale has been remembered.
The South African Police Service has found and seized the VW Polo.
Fezile Ngubane, one of the suspects in the Olorato Mongale murder case.
The main suspect in the murder of Olorato Mongale has been shot and killed.
The family of Olorato Mongale says they're relieved that justice in some ways has been served for the 30-year-old even before she's buried.
On the 25th of May 2025, a young bright student by the name of Olorato Mongale would be picked up by a man named John in a white VW Polo at a place of residence. You see, Mongale was under the impression that she was meeting John to go out for a date. However, little did she know that this event would not only change her life, but it would completely shock South Africa to the core.
Olorato wasn't reckless. She told her friends where she was going to be. She shared her location, and she met up with a guy who didn't raise any alarm bells. Abusers don't come with a warning sign labeled on their forehead. They act like regular people. How is a woman supposed to differentiate the good men from the bad men? When you tell women to just be more careful, you are admitting that violence is normal.
The pictures of the suspects are out. And they're on the run.
We're not safe in the safety of our own homes. We're not safe, especially if we dare to step outside.
This case here, Olorato, is really getting to me, because how can someone be so evil? How can someone be so evil?
This is why when I go on a date, I use my car. This is why I have pepper spray in my bag. These things have given you a false veil of safety.
You see, for us to fully grasp what exactly happened to Olorato Mongale, we have to look at who she was and the events that led up to this gruesome attack. You see, Olorato Mongale was a 30-year-old Rhodes University graduate and even a former journalist. And she was even an accomplished communications professional. You see, what happened was she met a man known as John at a shopping center in her hometown of Bloemfontein, Free State. You see, her and John would strike up a conversation and they would seemingly get along pretty well. And so after this exchange, what they would do is they would exchange numbers with each other so that they could stay in contact. And tragically, that's exactly what happened. See, John would later contact her, indicating that he was in Johannesburg and he would propose for them to meet for a date. And Mongale, who was pursuing a postgraduate degree at Wits University, agreed to meet him. So now this is very important. The day is currently Sunday, the 25th of May, and it's around the afternoon at around 3 p.m. Mongale would text a friend and she would express her excitement about getting ready for her date with John. You see, while she's texting her friend, she would share her plan, ensuring her location services were active, which is a precaution she took as part of a safety measure. Little did she know that this measure would come in handy when police would try to discover her. Now, at a little around 3 p.m., Mongale was picked up from her residential complex in Atoll, Johannesburg, by a man who was driving a white VW with a cloned license plate, which was a license plate that was actually registered to a Toyota
And also,
Hilux.
Linda, what's scary here is that she followed the rules. She told her friends where she's going. You know, she followed what police usually say you should do. If you are going on a date with someone you've just met, you share your location. She told them where she's going. She told them who's picking her up, etc. Yet she was still found dead.
This is a detail that seemed so significant during the events of this day, but in hindsight, it was a clear foreshadowing about the events that were about to come. See, at around this time, CCTV footage would actually capture Mongale leaving a location in Q, Johannesburg, dressed in a black sweater, black shirt, and white shoes, and walking towards the VW Polo. Now, when Mongale entered the car, it was around between 3 p.m. to around 10 to 5 p.m., where the suspect would actually drive Mongale through the township of Alexandra, and she proceeded to go to Q, which is a place around Joburg. However, he didn't stop there because he then went to an area between Alexandra and Lombardy West in Johannesburg. However, it was during this period where Mongale was tragically murdered. You see, her body was brutally violated according to a family spokesperson, and it was dumped in an open field in Lombardy West. However, it was around 5 p.m. where Mongale's body would be discovered in Lombardy Mbadi West, which is north of Johannesburg, by the South African Police Services, with, of course, the assistance from community members. You see, her phone and a handbag were also found discarded on 9th Road in Kew in Johannesburg, near the site where her body was also located. You see, this was less than 2 hours after she was reported missing by the concerned friend who had been tracking her phone's location. You see, it's very clear to see that Olorato Mongale turning on the location services and sharing a location with a friend is what likely got her body discovered. Because as we know, in South Africa, cases like these can grow cold very quickly due to lack of evidence. However, Mongale took the extra precautions to share her location and her plans with her friends, which is what likely got her discovered. However, on the 26th of May, on a Monday, SAPS would launch an urgent manhunt for the suspect who was known as John, and he was described as an African male who was driving the VW Polo that we would see in the CCTV footage.
In on one of those headline stories now, police are on the hunt for a man last seen with a Johannesburg woman who was later found murdered. Olorato Mongale went missing after being spotted leaving her home to meet a man driving a Polo Vivo who goes by the name of John.
You see, the police suspected that a second male might have also been involved in the murder, and it was around this time that Mongale's murder would spark intense public outrage and a renewed discussion about the gender-based violence that is happening in South Africa. People were clearly asking themselves what exactly is going on. You see, police would also begin investigating a possible link to a similar case in the Sandton area, which would include the murder of a 39-year-old woman whose body was also found dumped on Catherine Street in Sandown of Sandton on the 8th of May 2025. However, it wasn't until the 27th of May on Tuesday where social media platforms would start seeing an outpouring of grief and anger, and people would start to flock onto social media platforms to express how they felt about this case and what was clearly a serious problem in South Africa, and that's the gender-based violence that's clearly running rampant.
Why is it a woman's responsibility to not be violated instead of men being expected to not commit these acts in the first place? The truth is, women can do everything right. They can take every precaution and still end up like Olorato.
And even on Twitter, people were clearly showing their support for the police for doing their best and getting as many answers as possible regarding this case, with one comment saying, "No South African will pass without dropping a like." This is an appreciation post for Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, and this comment would gain 16,000 likes. And even another comment saying, "Olorato was a fiercely independent woman. She owned her own car, for heaven's sake. By the age of 25, she had accomplished so much, and it is a testament to her determination and resilience. She was a kind and compassionate soul, full of love and warmth." Justice for Olorato Mongale, gaining 8.3 thousand likes. The swift action by SAPS in tracking down those responsible for the murder of Miss Olorato sends a strong message that KwaZulu-Natal will never serve as a sanctuary for ruthless criminals. One thing was for sure, and that's the fact that the police service were working day and night to ensure that whoever was responsible for this murder was held accountable. However, things were about to get a bit crazy, because on the following day, on the Wednesday, a multidisciplinary team led by the SAPS Anti-Kidnapping Task Force would trace the white VW Polo to a panel beater workshop in Phoenix, Durban, and forensic experts found traces of blood inside the vehicle, linking it to Mongale's murder. And luckily, an elderly man who was believed to be the vehicle's owner was arrested in connection with the case. And very quickly after this, police would actually identify a criminal syndicate that was targeting women in shopping malls for kidnapping and robbery, luring them with promises of dates. And this syndicate was linked to Mongale's murder and other similar incidents. And on the Thursday, SAPS would name 3 suspects wanted in connection with Mongale's murder. One was Fezile Ngubane, Hilangi Nkosi, Makhanya, and Bongani Mtimkulu. You see, Makhaya and Mtimkulu had already been arrested in April 2025 for kidnapping and robbing a woman in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal using the exact same VW Polo. And tragically, around this time, they were out on bail. However, the mother and father of one of the suspects, who were identified as Makhanya's parents, were arrested for aiding their son's evasion of police. And wouldn't you believe it, the father was confirmed as the owner of the VW Polo, and the mother had allegedly tipped off her son about the police search. And on the following day, on the Friday, in the early hours of the morning, the main suspect, Philangenkosi Makaya, was located hiding at a residence complex in Amanzimtoti, KwaZulu-Natal. Makaya had repeatedly gone there to rent a car, but was refused due to his high-profile status after police issued a warning notice. However, when police announced their arrival, Makaya would open fire on the officers, who would obviously return fire, fatally wounding him. And KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi reported that Makanya confessed to Mongale's murder to the owner of the flat before the shootout. And at the time of his death, Makanya was found in possession of 28 ID cards and around a dozen mobile phones, suggesting his involvement in broader criminal activities.
The main suspect in the murder of Olorato Mongale has been shot and killed by police in KwaZulu-Natal. Philangenkosi Makanya was found by the police in Amanzimtoti, south of Durban. Now it's believed that he shot at police who returned fire.
And around this time, Mkhwanazi would also note that Makanya had mentioned a second suspect who was reportedly heading to Zimbabwe, indicating one of the remaining suspects might have already fled the country. And on Sunday, the 31st of May, one of the remaining suspects handed himself over to police at the Kwamashu police station in KwaZulu-Natal. This followed the death of Makanya and intensified police efforts to locate the remaining suspects. However, one suspect still remained at large. You see, this is where we are so far regarding the case of Olorato Mongale, a bright student who had such a bright future ahead of her, falling victim to the attacks of criminals in South Africa. Many people during this time have come out to show their support for the young student, and how, in all honesty, this should have never happened. It's clear that more needs to be done in South Africa to curb this gender-based violence issue that's plaguing the country, because as it stands, South Africa is not a safe place for our women. However, it's beautiful to see people speaking out about what's been happening and the police taking this matter seriously. However, what happens to the people who've been captured still remains to be seen.